Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. I don't know if you've been paying attention at all to California and our blackout situation. So this is a bit of a California story, but it could be your story too, right? This could be the story of the country if you don't learn from California's lesson and maybe, I don't know, not vote for our senator and attorney general to be president, for instance. So we have these blackouts in California. I was talking to some friends who don't live in California, and they're like, what? What are you talking about? Why do you have blackouts? What is it? They just turn the power off. The energy company just turns your power off intentionally. They turn it off. Why? Because it's too hot. It's so hot that people turn the AC on and we don't have enough electricity. So they turn the power off so that you don't use it anymore. Okay? That's California. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. They can't keep the lights on. So the San Diego Union Tribune, the UT, actually wrote a pretty good article about this. And for them, this is as truthful / conservative as they ever get. It's owned by the LA Times. So they had a headline, California experiences first rotating power outages in 19 years. What went wrong? So first they blame the fact that other states are really hot too, so we can't get energy from our neighboring states. But we should be able to make our own electricity. So that's a stupid excuse. That's lame. 25% of our electricity comes from other states, which is completely unnecessary. Now, the reason they do this is because in California, our green politicians want to be able to say, oh, X percentage of our electricity comes from green sources, which we'll get to in a second. But it doesn't really. We get our energy from Arizona, who burns coal or whatever, right? But our production in California is so green. Well, yeah, but you're getting a quarter of it from other, anyway, that's why they do it. So that's a lame excuse. Second thing, this is Steve Burberich. He's the CEO of what's called CAISO. It's the California Independent, what is it? I don't know, whatever. It's the place that runs the grid, right? They're in charge of the whole statewide grid. He said, people often wonder how we made it through the 2006 heat storm and not this one. It's quite simple. There was a lot more generating capacity on the system in 2006 than 2012. How about that? We made more electricity in 2006, 14 years ago, than we do today. How could that possibly be? How are we making less electricity? Renewables. But from heretofore, we will no longer refer to them as renewables. You know what I'm talking about, renewables, solar and wind. They're not renewable. There's nothing renewable about them. Solar panels don't grow in fields. They don't grow in the wild. You got to mine rare earth metals from China, ship them across, and then what do you do when the lifespan of these solar panels are done? They just dissolve into the ground and, they're toxic waste chemicals. What are you gonna do with them? Nothing renewable about this stuff. It's an amazing PR campaign these people played on us. They're called unreliables. Don't call them renewables anymore. They're called unreliables. Here's the UT. Cloudy conditions reduced solar generation produced across the state, and breezes lagged, which dropped production from wind farms. So they didn't work. 32% of our electricity in California comes from renewables, which, by the way, is a number, or unreliable, see? I doubt that number. A lot of the time what they do is when they calculate renewable energy, they calculate maximum maximum ability. If everything was humming nonstop, if the wind was blowing nonstop, and if the sun was shining nonstop, then this is how much energy these solar panels and windmills would make. That's how they calculate that number a lot. But anyway, the point is the state is admitting that solar and wind weren't making any electricity the other day. But you know what you can calculate and predict? Energy that comes from a nuclear power plant. It's reliable, it's consistent, you can predict it. You can't calculate potential energy production of a wind or solar farm. There's way too many variables. They're unreliable, so don't call them renewables anymore. They're unreliable. So whether it's 32% or 10% in practice, either way, they didn't work. And I'm grateful that the UT sort of mentioned this, but they put a little out in there. Check out this sentence. While solar production is robust during the day, it does not generate at night after the sun goes down, and wind farms do not produce power when breezes list. It's a weird sentence. The intermittent nature of such sources can strain the grid during the evening hours when customers run their air conditioners and appliances. Here's the thing. For some, the outages and energy shortfalls bring up the question about whether California is moving too quickly to shut down baseload fossil fuel energy sources, such as natural gas plants that can generate electricity around the clock and fill in the gaps when needed. Yeah. It says for some, why is everyone not thinking this? Some are no, everyone should be. And here's the out that they put in there, that we're moving too quickly to the unreliables. No, it doesn't matter if we get there in a week or 10 years or 100 years. We're getting to a place where we're relying on things that don't work most of the time. I don't care how quickly you get there, how slowly you get there, we're moving in a direction that we shouldn't be moving. And it's only gonna get worse. So Diablo Canyon, it's our last nuclear power plant. It's ready to shut down in 2024. They've already decommissioned it. We get 9%, so 10% of our electricity in the state comes from that one nuclear power plant. And it's set to go offline. So what are we gonna do in 3 years? We're gonna lose the most reliable source of electricity in the state. And replace it with what? More unreliables, if anything. 46% of our electricity comes from natural gas, but that's an evil fossil fuel. And our politicians want to get rid of they want 100% of our energy to come from the unreliables by 2024. So they want to be entirely dependent on energy sources that don't make energy when the sun isn't shining or when the wind isn't blowing. Are we out of our minds? And by the way, you have a chance to vote for our US Senator in 2.5 months. We'd have blackouts all the time. So would you. We'd have blackouts all the time for any reason whatsoever. By the way, we got a lot to do here, but we also turn the power off in California when it's too windy. It's too windy because they're afraid that the power lines are going to fall down and then start a wildfire. So it's too windy, they shut the power down. It's too hot, they shut the power down. Like, what kind of thermal country is this? I love this line. This is from the board of directors, I think, of the California Utilities Commission. She says, we are moving forward with a low carbon grid. And I think the direction is, as long as it's not too windy, and I think the direction is really clear and we're not moving back. We're not going backwards, we're going to move forwards. No. We are moving back. We're moving back. We're moving back to a time when there's no electricity. This is not forward. Blackouts are not forward. They're called greenouts. Call them greenouts now. Forcing people to not have electricity is not progress. You're moving us back to a time when people did not have electricity. You're literally moving us backwards in the name of progress. So we don't have enough water storage in California. And this is the wildest thing. I know I'm getting too California-y here, but when I used to live in Tennessee, we would cover, on the radio show, we'd cover California stories all the time, because California is always a crystal ball for the craziness that's gonna sweep across the country. So it's worth keeping an eye on this stupid state. Can't believe I live here. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, water storage. We don't have enough water storage in California. We haven't built a reservoir in like 30 years. So we passed Prop 1 a couple of years back, 2016 maybe, I don't know. And Prop 1, big water bond. It was like $7 billion. It didn't increase water storage at all. There was no increase of water storage at all. And not only that, they were actually in the Prop 1 was to remove dams. So we were actually decreasing water storage because of Prop 1. So Jerry Brown, he tours across the entire state talking about how we need to increase water storage, we need Prop 1, Prop 1, Prop 1, Prop 1. And then we pass it, and there's no increase of water storage in the entire bill. And they remove dams because they want to rewild the rivers. Right? So we don't have enough water storage here in California. We run out of water. And we don't make enough electricity. So these are both man-made disasters in California. It's the stupidest state in the country. So how can we have, how is this possible? How did we get here? How can we have such an irrational energy policy in California? And I guess the good thing is you can point to it very clearly. So we'll talk about the motivation behind this next. True story. Mike Slater. Got the work. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So I live here in San Diego, so we're talking about the California blackouts. And it's relevant to everyone because our US Senator, I don't know if you know this, happens to be in the running for vice president on the Democratic Party. So you too can vote for rolling blackouts across your state and across the entire country too. What do you think the Democrats stand for? All this Green New Deal nonsense? That's what this is. This is your future. You vote for this. I mean, I don't think it's dramatic. I don't know what, we've been doing this for like 10 years here in California, and here you see the effect of it. It's a little too hot out, so they turn the power off because we're not making enough of it. Unreliables. Okay, so why? How do we get here? So here's the very quick bottom line. We should have a bunch, I think we talked about this yesterday in greater detail, but we should have a bunch of nuclear power plants up and down the state. But the environmentalists in the 60s and in the 70s too, they didn't want it because they were too efficient. They made too much electricity and they were too inexpensive, which would then cause too many people to be born and to live here. And throughout the 60s, there was this whole thing about an overpopulation crisis. There are too many people on the planet, and cheap, affordable, efficient energy, nuclear power, would make that problem worse. Throw on top of that in California, Pat and Jerry Brown, the former governor and the governor at the time, had deep oil interests, like personal oil interests in Indonesia. There was an Indonesian dictatorship that had the state-run oil company with exclusive rights in California, and Jerry Brown did not want any competition to that. So that's it. That's why we don't have any electricity in California today. And still today, we're shutting down our nuclear power plant. San Onofre, which is right up the street here in San Diego, that shut down just a couple years ago, 2014 maybe. And then Diablo Canyon's the last one, like I said, ready to go offline soon. But don't worry, Gavin Newsom is very angry. He is just really fired up. So in the Union Tribune, they had a section of the paper, and it said, Newsom angry. And here's the quote from Newsom. These blackouts, which occurred without prior warning or enough time for preparation, summertime. Who saw it coming? Who would have saw this coming? To be in all fairness to Gavin Newsom, this came without any warning. Who would have thunk that in the middle of August it might get a little hot? No one would have known. It's like COVID, Who would have saw a virus coming from China that takes over the whole planet and causes a global pandemic? No one would have saw that coming. Same thing with summer. Summer only comes once every couple of years, and you never know. So give him some slack on that one. These are unacceptable and unbefitting. Who's ever said that word in a sentence? Unbefitting of and that's when you know you're really angry, when you use the word unbefitting, of the nation's largest and most innovative state. This cannot stand. California residents and businesses deserve better from their government. Gavin, you're the government. You are the governor. This is an outrage. I know. You're the guy. What are you doing? He's doing this act because he knows that one of the major reasons for recalling Gray Davis, the governor back in 2001, which led to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the reason for getting rid of Gray Davis, who was a huge disappointment, by the way, we'll save that for another day. One of the reasons for getting rid of him is that there were a bunch of rolling blackouts, and he didn't really do much about it. He didn't really say much about it. He kind of played it off, and people were outraged. So now Gavin Newsom's learned from that, and he's with the people. Oh, I'm so angry at this. This can't stand. Get out of here. All right, let me speak to the Malthusian point that I made just a second ago, because it's so bonkers it doesn't even register in a normal person's brain. So I think we may have talked about this yesterday, but it's worth playing again, because actually this idea that there's too many people. That's the Malthusian belief: is there's too many people on the planet and we're all going to die of starvation. That was one of the driving forces behind abortion. In the early Planned Parenthood days in the 50s and 60s, that was one of the main drives, is that there's too many people. So we need to kill babies in the womb to curb the population growth. Remember the clip we played we played the video of it, of Dr. Guttmacher. He was the national director of Planned Parenthood in 1962, and we played an interview from him in 1968. And he said, he was asked by a priest. The priest said, well, we all know we're in a terrible population crisis. What is Planned Parenthood doing to solve that problem, right? So it was like an assumed starting point, there's definitely a population crisis. And, well, they're gonna kill babies. Curb population growth was how he put it. So in that same vein, enter William Vaught, V-O-G-T, a silent G maybe, William Vaught. He wrote this book called Road to Survival. I think he wrote it in 1951, so it was a little bit before Guttmacher and all the rest. But he was also the national director of Planned Parenthood at that time, right? Same thing. This quote is just bonkers, right? So he said, there were too many people. He said, human progress is idiotic in an overpopulated atomic age with much of the world a shambles. But there was still time to avoid, as a quote, catastrophic crash of our civilization, but only through austerity, okay? So this guy, William Vaught, he was really worked up about the Indians, like people in India. Couldn't get over the people in India, way too many of them. He said before the British came, there were 100 million people in India. He said the population of India, was in check by disease, famine, and fighting. Within a remarkably short period, the British checked the fighting, and check this sentence out, contributed considerably to making famines ineffectual. Oh, stop. Making famines ineffectual? What do famines do? They kill people. Okay, that's an effective famine, is one that kills people. So the British came in and made the famine ineffectual, which means they saved people's lives. And this guy's like, thanks a lot, Brits. By building irrigation works, providing means of food storage, and importing food during periods of starvation. While economic and sanitary conditions were being improved, the Indians went to their accustomed way, breeding with the irresponsibility of codfish. Sex play is the national sport. Imagine being that guy. Seriously, imagine being that guy. We're like, oh, the famine didn't work. Great. Now there's gonna be way more people. Like some British guy comes and feeds a person. And they're like, no. Don't go feeding people now. Let the famine work. That guy was in the Sierra Club. He was one of the main guys who stopped power plants across California. Not to mention, again, head of Planned Parenthood. Amazing. Again, did they stop nuclear power because it was bad, it was polluted the planet? No, of course not. The opposite, it's the cleanest energy source there is. Did they stop it because it was too expensive? No, certainly not. Because it was too efficient at making power. It was too clean, too effective, and it would lead to more people. So what did they push instead? Renewables. Purposefully expensive and inefficient. Perfect for them. Now you're thinking, so because it's expensive and inefficient, it will naturally curb economic growth and therefore population growth too, which was their ultimate goal. Now this is insane. You're listening to this and you're like, Slater, I totally get this is insane. And it doesn't make any sense at all. But think about it. It's coming from the guy who's disappointed that there were no more famines in India, right? He was disappointed that the famines weren't allowed to work anymore in killing people. Right? That's the type of guy we're dealing with here. Like, how do you even have a conversation with that person? And that's the same mindset that we're governed by today when it comes to our electricity grid. I just can't get over that line. It's just wild. So that's it. Again, Guttmacher, same thing. Running Planned Parenthood. And I wonder how many, this is interesting, how many of the progressive policies today do we have because people at least thought or still maybe think that there's too many people? Because you have the Planned Parenthood guys, okay, so you have abortion because there's too many people. You have no nuclear power, no efficient, effective, reliable power because they thought there's too many people. And remember that quote we shared the other day? So you had Betty Friedan, Feminine Mystique. She was the leader of the second wave feminist movement, or the first person. She sparked it. And then it went to Gloria Steinem, and she's the one who just ramped it up to, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, right? So it turned it into a man-hating movement. And then Kate Millett came in, and she was just full-blown crazy Marxist. And like the cover of Time called her the Karl Marx of the feminist movement, and it was a compliment. And then it went to Simone de Beauvoir, who was like as far left crazy psycho as you could get. She hated women. She hated women and motherhood. And we shared that quote from Friedan. And Friedan met with Simone de Beauvoir and was like blown away, right? So you had the first person in second wave feminism, and then like the end of second wave feminism. And Friedan was like, how do you hate women so much? And Friedan was all about choice, right? You should be able to go to work if you want or stay at the home if you want. And Simone was like, no, staying at home, being a mother, all that stuff's terrible and awful and should be discouraged in every way. And Friedan said, well, how do you propose to have more people? Like to perpetuate the race or the human species? And Simone de Beauvoir said, there's already too many people. There's too many people already. And Friedan was appalled, right? She's like, what? So there's another example. So the whole feminist movement and anti-motherhood, anti-family is based on the idea that there's too many people already. So how many far-left movements today are based on this idea that there's too many people? Which is wrong, by the way. Right? And then how many of those people who think that have done the only principled thing that you could do if you really think that that's true, and kill yourself? And I don't mean to be flippant about this, right? But like, that's the ultimate hypocrisy, isn't it? You know, everyone talks about the hypocrisy of like people on the LAPD or LA City Council or Seattle City Council who want to defund the police and they vote to defund the police, but then they themselves get private police protection, right? Like that's pretty high up there on the hypocrisy scale. But I think the highest thing is you think there's too many people on the planet, but you keep living. Now you support causes that kill other people, or at least make other people impoverished, but you keep living yourself. Is there any greater hypocrisy than that, truly? And they'll come around, they'll be like, well, there's just the right amount of me. You go to the total extreme of this, I got to run here. The total extreme is Arnie Nice, or this, I forget the guy's name, how do you pronounce it? He coined the term deep ecology. So this is a philosophy that puts the earth above humans, literally. And he said that the eradication of smallpox was a crime against nature. And humans should protect smallpox, right? Because it's a part of the earth, and the earth is above humans. We're like a virus on the earth. Right. So anyway, in conclusion, you got a combination of this blind activism against nuclear energy because it was too efficient. You got the Brown family's oil interest in Indonesian dictatorship-run state oil companies, and every proposal for a nuclear power plant was shot down in the 60s and 70s. There was a proposal in 1975 for 5 of them in San Diego, and the governor stepped in. Actually, the head of CARB, the California Air Resource Board, which was Governor Newsom's campaign manager before that, said new fossil fuel power plants can be built in California without causing environmental damage. So you had Jerry Brown, who's like this big climate crusader today, who 30 years ago, when he was governor, first time, he said, nah, we'll be fine with coal. Coal and oil will be great. We could have had nuclear power by now and would have been way ahead of the game. You know, we could have had electricity. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Coming up next, we're going to talk to an author who wrote a book about a bunch of stories of millennials on the left who have turned and are now conservative, and how that happened. So he's going to tell us some good stories about that coming up just in a minute here. So in that vein, I want to tell another story here about the 19th Amendment. So real quick, did you see the left is trying to cancel Susan B. Anthony? Have you seen this? Because she was racist. Susan B. Anthony did not do enough for black women to vote, so she has to be canceled. No one's safe. For the love of Pete, they're trying to cancel Susan B. Anthony. You thought it would stop at Robert E. Lee? You kidding me? Susan B. Anthony, who saw that one coming? No one is safe on this march towards utopia. No one's pure enough. It's impossible to ever be pure enough. And then Trump pardoned her because she was arrested in 1876 or so for registering to vote. She was arrested, this whole thing. And Trump pardoned her. And the left, because they have to be against everything Trump does always, they're upset because they say Susan B. Anthony wanted to be arrested. So you're destroying her legacy, blah, 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 like these people. All right, so I got a good story about this. 19th Amendment, 100 years ago yesterday. It's only 39 words. It's a short little amendment. It says, I got it here, the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. That's it. And Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Done. So to make a constitutional amendment, you need 36 states to ratify it in their state legislatures. It's a pretty cool process that the Founding Fathers came up with. So 35 states ratified it. So 35 states. So the suffragists, hate that word. When did that word ever, you know what I mean? I always have to think about it. I hear suffrage and I'm like, that's two vote. Okay, I still can't. Anyway, so the suffragists who wanted to vote, they were looking at the remaining states that haven't ratified it yet. And they're like, all right, which one here has the best shot? Which one do we need to rally at and get on board? And of the remaining states, the one shot they had was Tennessee. Go Vols. Good old Rocky Top. The day of the vote, it was like nearly violent going all around Nashville. It's crazy. But it came down to Tennessee. So they had two votes. The first vote was to table it, which was essentially to kill it, right? You kill it without voting for it. So we're like, we'll worry about this another time. So they voted, 48-48 tie. So they did not get to table it. So now it's time to vote. Yes or no? What do you say? 19th Amendment, women vote. So imagine this, the entire gallery's packed. I mean, everyone knew the first vote was a tie, right? So if it tied again, then it wouldn't work. So someone had to flip. Now, I guess someone could have, everyone said the same, it wouldn't have passed. So no one had to flip negative. But if one person flipped positive, then that's all it would have taken. It was a tie. And they really believed this was the last chance for the women's right to vote movement, for the 19th Amendment. It came down to one person in this chamber in Nashville 100 years ago. One person. Enter Harry T. Byrne. He's from East Tennessee, Neota, Tennessee. Actually, what am I saying? My wife is from Tennessee. It's probably Nyota. Nyota? Yeah, it's Nyota. I'm trying to put a southern drawl on that. No way would they call it Neota. Nyota. Today, it has a population of 726 people. Okay, I don't know if 100 years ago they were like a booming metropolis, but today it's a tiny little town. It's right in between Knoxville and Chattanooga. He was the youngest representative in the state. He's 24 years old. His nickname was Baby Byrne. Baby Byrne. And the anti-suffrage people, they were sure that he was on their side. And actually he was on that first vote. And they told him, you better vote this way. Oh, so your entire career is in jeopardy, kid. Baby Byrne. So they did a roll call, right? Go around the room. They got to Baby Byrne. And he stood up. And he reached inside his pocket, his coat, and he felt a letter that was inside his jacket pocket. And it was a letter that his mother wrote him. Feb Byrne. Feb Byrne was a widow who was running the family farm. And she was reading the newspaper accounts on how this vote was going. And she never read anything about her son. Didn't know how her son was going to vote. So she decided to write him a note. Give him a little nudge in the right direction. It was a 6-page letter. All the small talk up front about the weather and the farm and some weddings she went to and all this stuff. And then it got down to business. And she wrote to her son. She said, hurry and vote for suffrage and don't keep them in doubt. Baby Byrne felt that note and he voted yay on the 19th Amendment. He flipped his vote. Everyone goes nuts, right? Imagine this scene. You got the suffragettes who are, they're screaming, throwing roses down on the representatives. Roses was the big symbol, right? If you were a suffragette, you wore, I think it was a yellow rose pin, and you carried roses around with you everywhere. And then if you were a lawmaker who was for you would get a red pin. So roses were a big thing, right? So the suffragettes, they started throwing roses down on top of everyone, and the anti-suffrage people, they're screaming and yelling at Baby Byrne. How could you? You read right. And Baby Byrne stayed calm. And he said the next day, I knew that a mother's advice is always safest for a boy to follow. And my mother wanted me to vote for ratification. And then a couple of years later, he said, I think it was morally right. I thought it then, and I still think it today. The Knoxville newspaper, they printed this nice little poem about him. There's a young man from Nyota who for precedent cares no iota. He sprung a surprise when he flopped to the eyes and enraptured the feminine vota. Pretty good. Huh? We need more poems in our newspapers. That's great, right there. More haikus would be better. less than 2 months later, his mom registered to vote. Guys, do you have the registration card? This is her, this is Feb's voter registration card. So you can see at the top, it says, this is to certify that Miss Feb Byrne is a legal voter. Now, do you notice the thing here? And this is why I love history so much. When you get to the primary source documents, this is where history lives. Do you notice anything odd about this? First of all, she's voter 1, which is pretty cool. See on the middle left-hand side, it says number 1. You see anything else? So look after that. So it says number 1 on a white residence in Iota, Tennessee. What's the next word? And he is entitled to vote. They didn't have time to print new cards. It still says he on it. She cast a ballot for the first time in her life at the age of 47. There is a statue today in Knoxville with Harry, and that's his mom standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder. Now you know the rest of the story. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So a couple years ago, I wrote this book, very short little pamphlet book called How to Change Someone's Mind. And there's a couple different points in it all, but the overarching theme is, the importance of building relationships. And I get people all the time to talk to me, like, how are we gonna win this? How are we gonna change mind? Especially with millennials who are so just caught up in the tidal wave, the tsunami of progressivism just everywhere they turn. How do we do this? I think our next guest has an idea. Jonathan Jakubowski. The book is Bellwether Blues, A Conservative Awakening of the Millennial Soul. Jonathan, how are you, brother?
Doing great, Mike. Thanks so much for having me on.
Man, good to talk to you. So what have you seen? How is it possible to have millennials be conservative? The assumption obviously is, they're going to be progressive and Marxist forever. Is it possible otherwise?
It's absolutely possible, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And what I found in researching the millennial generation is while the stereotypes certainly fit a lot of millennials, there are a lot of millennials out there tearing down statues and participating in protests and beating up people on the streets. There's a whole other subset of this generation, the largest generation in American history, that is in mainland America and the states that are going to decide the presidential election in 2020. And Mike, you and I are both millennials. And as I knew more millennials in my life, I asked that question, well, are we all the same? Are we all these statue-tearing, far progressive, left-of-center individuals? And the data shows that no, not all millennials are like that. In fact, many millennials are leaving the left. And they're leaving the left because the left has gone so far radically left of center. They've abandoned the position of the First Amendment freedom. I will defend what you have to say to the death, which maybe Democrats in the 1950s might have agreed with. Now they no longer do. And that left a distaste in millennials' minds. And that's why they're frustrated, skeptical, disillusioned. In other words, Mike, they've called the blues because they can't embrace either side.
So that's the point, is they could not be on the far left, but they could instead just be nothing and not conservative. Correct. Or not embrace the alternative. So what is an alternative that's appealing to many millennials?
So I went into Wood County, Ohio, which is the county I live in, and it's one of a handful of counties of 3,142 counties in the entire nation. There are only 59 that follow this designation as having voted twice for Bush, twice for Obama, and then for Trump. And I looked into the lives of those millennials who swung their votes from Obama to Trump to understand what caused them to make that shift. And what I found is that while conservatives have gotten a lot better at using tech to maybe navigate campaigns, one of the things that we've lost is the art of individual persuasion, to go back to your book. And one of the things that millennials most desperately need today is authentic relationship. We're behind screens all day long, computers, phones. Millennials are in desperate need of people that can step in and mentor and cultivate relationships with them. And that's what happened with these 7 millennials. It was relationship that led them to recognize that voting is not about personality. It's not about the charisma of the candidate or their fame. It's really about the policies and principles that they represent.
Yeah, so I hear that, and I was like, that's so definitely true, but it's such hard work, right? And the parties are all about whatever, having a snazzy Instagram page, which is not what you're talking about. So can you give some examples of what of relationship building and what one-on-one relationship looks like in this context?
Sure, and that's not to say that we should disregard the usage of tech in platforms or campaign strategies. I'm involved in the local Republican Party here. People like you that are out there that have a major voice. We need to use these platforms to combat the leftist hegemony of big tech and mainstream media that are out there perpetuating falsehoods. So that really matters. But what I found is there are many conservatives who are sitting on their couch at home asking the question, what can I do to impact the next generation? We're going to hell in a handbasket. That's kind of the terms that I would hear from Gen Xers and baby boomers. And the answer that I found is, step out of your life into someone else's life, probably a niece, a nephew, a grandson, a granddaughter, a neighbor, somebody you already know, you already have some relationship with, and begin to invest in their life. Become a mentor to them. It's what millennials most desperately need in this age where we have so much social media and social interactions. That face-to-face relationship with somebody who cares about you carries immeasurably more value. And in the 7 lives of the stories that we had, one example I'll give is that of Douglas. Douglas was a flaming socialist. He was marching on the streets. He voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary of 2016. Well, a veteran who was about 7 to 8 years his senior came into his life and decided to start, having him reflect upon some of the things that he was thinking, challenging his philosophies, asking him a lot of questions. And over 6 months, not only did Douglas change his vote to Donald Trump, he now represents an organization that is all about free enterprise.
Love it. I'm glad you said the 6 months, because I was wondering how long this takes. So in the stories you share, how long does this mentoring process usually take?
Yeah, it varies. Some of them experienced journeys that took years, where it was 4 to 5 years before something happened. A lot of millennials now between ages 24 and 39 years of age, we're having children, we're raising families, we have jobs, we're paying taxes, we're off of college campuses, we have more availability to other voices besides those professors that are trying to indoctrinate us. So there's a lot of open space in our lives, and then sometimes that process of evolution and transformation can take a while. But I think in this election in particular, there were 2 things that I found that are very common in terms of what American millennials value in mainland America. One is freedom. As we've seen the left go so far left of freedom, many millennials really desire and recognize that that's something they distaste. The libertarian instincts kind of arise with them as we've had freedom in our national anthems. It's on our coins. It's in our conversations. So talking about freedom really matters, and kind of tying the knot to help them understand that this philosophy, this leftist Marxist ideology will squelch freedom is huge. The second thing millennials value is compassion. A lot of millennials have taken lower paying jobs with lower wages because of a cause. It's a cause-minded generation. They've seen what Gen Xers have done to go for big money, and then found that were found wanting. They didn't really find the fulfillment or embrace the fulfillment that they yearned for through money. So millennials have taken a different approach, and they believe causes are the answer. And one of the things that I think conservatives have done a very poor job of is communicating why conservative principles are compassionate, why free enterprise benefits the inner city mother who's single, who has 2 kids, who takes a minimum wage job and kind of rises the ladder, becomes a manager, and breaks the cycle of multi-generational poverty. That's not a story that happens in socialism. That happens in free enterprise. When we can tie the knot with those 2 things, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's so good. So that you're at the compassion part, definitely you have one has a knee-jerk reaction that's the Democratic Party. Still, at least that's my thought. I know it's wrong, obviously, but is that true? Is most people still think Democratic Party compassionate?
Yeah, absolutely they do. And, most people think that the Democratic Party is the party that ended slavery, the party that stood for civil rights, the party that gave women the vote. Yesterday, we celebrated the 19th Amendment, which celebrated women's suffrage. That was all the Republican Party. The Republican Party was formed in 1854 to abolish slavery. It championed women's suffrage. It championed civil rights. So when you start using these facts, and you can take millennials on this conversational journey, asking them questions and having them rethink things, it opens their mind to a different possibility that I think could awaken them.
What is something about the Republican Party, or maybe conservatism, I don't know how you want to do that, that millennials are very turned off by?
Well, yeah, Republican Party and conservatism aren't always synonymous. Your party power is about really finding a way to win office, essentially. So the party party politics that we're engaged in, reflects that. But there's philosophies that each side, the Democrats and the Republicans, both represent. And what's happened with the parties is they've each separated further from each other. But through Pew Research, what we found is that the Democratic Party especially has gone radically to the left, embracing these far left of center values. Bernie Sanders on the first night of the Democratic convention said ideas that were once radical are now mainstream thanks to Joe Biden. So they're embracing this radicalization of ideology that they now see. So the problem with Republicans is a lot of times we don't stand for the convictions that our platform represents. And while millennials are the least religious generation in American history, but the same message seems to come from Republicans all of the time. We don't communicate in a way that's persuasive and compassionate and effective, explaining why even if you don't believe in God, that those principles are going to lead to human flourishing of the least of these. We don't communicate effectively to help meet them where they're at, where they're paying loans, they just got out of college, they're not embracing the riches. We talk all about why shareholders of corporations need to have tax benefits, when in reality, many of the large corporations in crony capitalism are benefiting from the regulation created by democratic philosophies. So I think we have to be more effective at understanding these things and communicating these things, because right now the Republican Party has this old, rich, white male identity that everybody seems to believe of our generation.
Yeah, and it's not true. Give me one more story from the book of someone, I say turning, like that's a dramatic term for it, but changing their mind.
Sure. One is Aaron Lawrence. So there's 7 stories identify. You can check them out. We have YouTube videos of each of them. So they're all very powerful and moving. But Aaron Lawrence hailed from inner city Cleveland, in an area that was very impoverished. A lot of gangs and drugs reigned there. But he was the only kid he knew in his high school whose father was involved in his life. And that made a big difference. So when Aaron left Cleveland and came to Bowling Green State University, the first of his entire family to ever go to college, to ever eventually graduate from college. In fact, he had never met a Republican in his entire life until he came to Bowling Green State University here in Wood County. And through an awakening of faith and being engaged in the community, having his wife and his children, he knew that welfare wasn't an option when he went into a struggling economy following the Great Recession and couldn't find a job. So he had to make a choice, and it was his father's values that really taught him that the option for his family was not to go on welfare. They needed to find a job and work their way through it. Well, through that process, what he saw is Obama's failed promises to inner city communities weren't working, in particular in this case, welfare, and he needed to be the father his children deserved. So he stepped up and started thinking differently about politics and differently about the presidential election. And that, aligned with the values of Scripture as a believer in Christ, led him to have a dramatic shift to vote for Donald Trump in 2016.
Love that story. I was looking here for a tweet that you reminded me of, and I can't find it here, but it was someone, I forget what pastor it was, but he said, and I want to go, my last question for you is about authenticity. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about like abortion and how that's obviously a pretty tricky thing to talk about. I don't think it should be. I think you should speak openly and boldly about it. And I think one reason why maybe conservatives have lost that debate, it seems like, is we're so very like, I don't want to step up. I got it, right? As opposed to just being like, no, here's what I think. And I saw a tweet the other day from our pastor. He said, here's your steps for growing your church. Step up to the pulpit, open the Bible, read the Word of God, pray. Right, like that, or like speak the word, and like that's, and there's like a confidence and a boldness and an authenticity to that I think people are actually yearning for, even though our instinct is maybe to like, walk on eggshells, don't step on anyone's toes, don't hurt anyone's feelings, blah, blah, blah. So make all that make sense in the name of authenticity.
I agree with you 100%, Mike. And millennials live in an era that's postmodern, where they have a buffet of truth claims being presented to them and no truth is absolute. Well, we know that is absolutely false because our lives depend upon absolute truths. And I think given that fact in this postmodern era, millennials yearn more for truth than any other generation. Now, it might take them a while to get over the offense that they might have because of the way they've been, taught in universities and indoctrinated with leftist education. But once you get past those walls, you can tear them down and they have trust in you. They're going to want to know what you believe in and what your convictions are. And when you stand up to the plate and you speak truly and authentically, it reaches the soul.
Yeah, it's so good. I pronounced your name probably wrong. Jonathan Jakubowski, how is it?
Well, I didn't play running back in college for a reason. I didn't juke very well. I played linebacker. So my name is actually Jakubowski, but I'll go with it.
Wow. No, this is amazing. I think I did that twice. I flipped the A and the U. I'm clearly not the first person to have done that because you have a nice little comeback to it.
No, yeah, it happens all the time. So I'll go by anything, Mike. No problem.
Wow. So say it again.
Jakubowski.
Jakubowski. Very good. Jonathan Jakubowski. Bellwether Blues, a conservative awakening of the millennial soul. Yeah, go get this. Super important. Jonathan, appreciate you, man. Let's talk again.
Hey, I appreciate you too. Anytime, Mike. Thanks so much. God bless you.
Really good. Yeah, man, you too, bro. I've always said that if you ask anyone who the most influential person is in their life, they're not going to say Rachel Maddow. Right? They're going to say a friend, a family member, right? And that person could be you. You could be the most influential person in someone's life. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.